opinion, the Drizzle season has had probably the widest split of kits we've ever had. There are some really bad ones and some really good ones. So today, I'm gonna be ranking them in competitive play from worst to best. Obviously, if you play for fun, just pick whichever one you want. These are just gonna be my opinions of someone who plays at top level Splatoon on which ones I think have a good chance of succeeding. Subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. Well, the bottom weapon on this list might be the most obvious thing ever, and yeah, it's not even close. It's the custom GoodTuber. I have some positive things to say about this. I've played a good bit of K-Luna, and I can say this kit synergy is really fun. Fizzy and Stamp go together very well, and I think it's fun with the main weapon too. I also think Stamp does have some practical uses for GoodTuber. If you're like under a ledge and shooting at someone and then you get dropped on, instead of having to wait for a super long charge time, you can pop it. You can throw it at long range weapons. Like, it's alright. I kind of have two main problems. One, GoodTuber is a bad main weapon right now, and two, Ultra Stamp is a bad special right now. Currently, the two best classes in the game, and what make up 3 or 4 weapons on most comps, are shooters and splatlings, which are the worst matchups for Ultra Stamp to fight. Also, they like literally just added a new ballpoint and heavy edit, both of which also shoot through it. Any good synergy that Hammer might have for this thing wants to do doesn't matter as much if you're dying through the hammer, you know? As for the main weapon, I can safely say it's been a problem. This weapon has had access to torpedo tentamissiles, one of the best kits in the entire game, and I struggled to see even the tiniest bit of use. The main weapon does have some long distance pressure. Obviously it has that one shot and it has some good mobility with the charge hold, but it's very unreliable. If you miss a shot, you have a super long charge time to get another, and because of that large charge time, you're not going to do as much painting, you're not going to be putting out as many shots, and you're going to be having more downtime. GoodTubers really just struggled to find its niche, and I think this kit with Stamp and GoodTuber buffs could maybe have a future, but right now it just goes to show the bad spot both the main and special are in. I have a bit less to say about Blob Deco. I'll get the angle shooter out of the way first. It's not a good sub for it. It is, again, really fun. Blob players love to do geometry wall bounce stuff, and angle shooter does the same thing. However, may I remind you, one sub a bomb defense, and your combo is just not there anymore. There's no counterplay you can do to avoid that, so you know, that's kind of a problem. Kraken for it, I'm kind of fine with. Blob is definitely more of a support than anything, especially with its vanilla kit, and this is something that wants to push it to be more aggressive. But the problem is the sub is what needed to do that. Blob is easy to run down if you close the gap, and being more aggressive does have to work for you. That worked okay in Splatoon 2 because they gave it a wall. It's a lot harder to run the blob down when it has a shield, but it doesn't have a shield. It doesn't even have a sub for reliable damage. Luckily, it's a 200p Kraken, you'll be able to get it a lot, but even then, Kraken has a lot of startup. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I could maybe see this in Rainmaker for the main weapon's high shield damage, or Clam Blitz for Kraken cheese, but even then, Blob with a relatively solid kit has struggled to see use on zones, which is probably its best mode. Again, I think this kit is really fun. I've enjoyed playing it, but I see just too many holes for it to see some competitive use. I'd love to be wrong though. Number 8 is Octobrush Nouveau. I don't have a lot to say about this thing. Beacon worked on Octobrush in Splatoon 1 because you would get Kraken and Kraken was broken, and then you would Kraken and put beacons, and that was really good for the type of map design Splatoon 1 had and meta that game had. It's not the same here. They keep giving beacon to weapons that have a poor time getting special, poor range, and poor entry on hallway maps when you don't have a bomb to make up for any of that. Beacon has been seeing some success in this game on weapons like Tent, or Dually Squelcher, or even Wiper, which is way longer range than most people seem to remember. It has not been seeing success on short range weapons. So why is this number 8 when Inkstorm is a solid but not amazing special, and Octobrush is a weapon that hasn't really seen much use? Well, one reason. Flounder Heights splat zones. It is going to have a dominant niche. Beacons are very good there. The main weapon's very good there. Inkstorm is like a top 2 special on that map because it's very important to be able to move and push in and displace people on the roofs, and it does all of that. Blob's niche is much more theoretical. I am rather confident we will be seeing Octobrush Nouveaus on Flounder Heights, so that's why it goes there, even if it's just one map. Maybe it could work on some of the more open maps, like maybe on Crab Leg that they added, because that's an actual stage. Even then, I don't think it's going to be that great. We'll see though. Yeah, Gold Dynamo's kit is cool. I actually don't have too much to say about this. Obviously, the main weapon needs some help, but it's seen some some small uses on zones maps like Flounder and Humpback with its vanilla kit. While this new kit definitely isn't better, I think it has some uses. The Chump's instant paint on the zones can pair very well with Dynamo, and it functions as a really fast ink tank refill. Basically, if this thing is trying to constantly fight for a zone contestation, this kit is much better at doing it. And on top of that, you have Splat Bomb for some niche poking situations or as a get off me tool. Chump in zones is pretty solid right now. However, this would be a lot more threatening a combo if the main weapon of Dynamo had better paint. If this thing was able to spam Chump and the paint on the zone from the main weapon would be good like it is on the special, all of a sudden this would be a very difficult weapon to deal with that would constantly keep the map in its color and constantly have entry tools for its team. But it's not. Dynamo is not in the greatest spot right now. Its damage is weak, its paint is solid but not where it needs to be, and it's very slow. I just don't think it's enough to make it work as much as it would need to be to play to this unique strength. The kit definitely has a future if the main weapon can get some buffs. At number 6 is the Inkline Tri-Stringer. So I actually really like this kit. Sprinkler is solid for it. It could be better, but it works fine. Sprinkler has been on other backline weapons that have seen success in the meta, like Heavy and Pencil. I also really like Super Chump for it. It's, again, kind of in that middle of the road spot when it comes to specials, but it helps its long distance painting weakness, can combo with it, and works well for weapons that Tri-Stringer wants to play with. Out of all the weapons on the list, this is the one I could see potentially being higher in the future. Tri-Stringer has a lot of weird properties that could be valuable. The thing is, I feel like it's just really hard to get value from it. While this weapon allows you to build comps around it better than the vanilla kit due to making up for some of its weaknesses a bit better, I'm still unsure how something as unreliable as a Tri-Stringer is gonna keep up with such a fast-paced meta, especially with some more new Splatlings, some of which are even faster. Again, I think it could work. Tri-Stringer is definitely one of the weapons with the best potential argument, but it's hard to give the potential argument a lot of credit on a list when the first kit hasn't seen much outside of very early into the game when it was fighting crabs. And that made more sense where you had slow targets with very few things that could break them with the backline with high object damage. That's just not the meta we have anymore though. So again, maybe it could be higher, but for now I'm gonna rank it here. I think it's kind of a mid-tier weapon. So at number 5 is the new weapon on the block, the Dreadringer. This weapon got 90 damage, got a bit of hype. It turns out it has a bit more range than the vanilla Slosher, which is pretty good, but outside of that, the perception of it has been whatever. There's been some tweets from prominent players like Kyo and Gray that immediately don't really like it. It definitely is the range blaster of Sloshers. That extra range, extra power, and the speed and ink efficiency are both worse. This weapon has 10 Sloshes and 40 white ink frames, which makes using its bomb a little bit too difficult. On top of that, it is also stuck with Slider. The weapon definitely has some practicality, and the only reason it's this high is I do think on zones maps it's pretty powerful, especially since the suction can help Reef Slider Cheese be even stronger. However, it doesn't really have a factor to make you super respect the weapon. Against something like a range blaster, while the long distance AoE is strong, you can't just run its slow speed down because it can still direct you. Even if it's unreliable, it's still something that can get it out of some situations, where Dreadringer doesn't really have that. If you're close enough to fight the weapon, you can probably kill it before it has the chance to hit 3 sloshes. It makes it a bit more susceptible to being run down than it seems, and on top of that, 90s are really hard to hit. As a new weapon, of course, there is potential it could be pushed further, but for the time being, I think this is where it's gonna end up. Just kind of a zones niche weapon with potential for future buffs or a better special. Moving on to number 4, we got an alternate kit for an infamous weapon, Machine Neo. So this thing did get 190 Zuka, but man, without Fizzy it really struggles to get a lot of them. The only real hope for this weapon was opening Gambit playstyle and getting a lot of assists to keep it going and having that extra mobility to maybe help the weapon. And while I think that's okay, I just don't really see it over the vanilla kit, and even then, I think there are plenty of better Zuka options, with Splattershot and Squeezer both being pretty good right now. I think Machine is fine, but it needs a bit more than a mediocre kit in order to be more than fine, and from my own experimentation, I just haven't really seen any reason to think the opening Gambit style is that good. At number 3 is the Sorella Brella. That's right, a Brella got this high on the list. To be fair, this patch did give it a bit. It got a nice bug fix for its shield, it regens it a bit faster, this kit's 190p, and oh yeah, the top 2 kit in the game with Autobomb Jetpack. Of course, on a better weapon, this would be way higher, but I think Brella with this kit works fine. It does get a lot of jetpacks and paints decently well, so I think it works well enough to where you're threatening to kind of spam jetpack at the other team if they ignore you. In addition, Cooler's mobility buffs opens the door to running builds built around that inkjet, stuff like a little bit of main saver, charge up, special power, and I think it makes comeback very nice for this weapon. It still has its problems, and I think it's not going to be any better than high tier at best. You know, the shield is still somewhat inconsistent at times, the weapon's damage still isn't great, and it's still a bit difficult against a lot of the specials in the game. But it does have a kit that forces people to play around it, and in the right team comp, it definitely has reasons to be picked. And number 2 is the ballpoint splatling Nuvo. I mean, ballpoint requires no introduction. Mine on it is pretty solid, even if it can't poke for as good distance paint, it still works well enough, and Vacuum's in a solid spot right now. I think this weapon especially thrives on Rainmaker, where its higher shield DPS makes it a lot more worth using than something like Jet Squelcher. Jet will still paint further away and get more vacuums though, so it faces a bit of competition in the other modes. But even with that, the main weapon is definitely very solid, and I think this will be a weapon we will see a lot of. However, number 1 belongs to a different splatling, the Heavy Edit splatling. We're still figuring out this weapon's playstyle a bit, but it seems to be a more midline weapon that can be pretty aggressive. It's ridiculously fast while having the run speed capabilities of the mini splatling. It has the range of Nautilus, and its fire rate is ridiculous when fully charged. This gives it very solid painting, especially when using the paint tech properly, and with its ink efficiency of 5 full charges, it doesn't have that much downtime and can even use its curling bomb pretty often. Of course, on top of all of that, it's farming a Tacticooler, so you're going to be able to give a ton of support to your team and play off of that insane run speed. It has a decent bit of gear freedom, which is pretty cool, and the only real downside is its long charge time, but I don't think this is that bad. It's only 60 frames to get the first charge ring, and that fire rate is still pretty useful for fighting. I do think the weapon lacks the range to be played like a real backline, so it has to be paired with something else. I'm thinking Squeezer and Splash both have high potential. But regardless, I think this is an excellent candidate of a cooler option, and I'm very curious to see just how far this weapon can be pushed given the right comp. And that's been all 10 weapons ranked. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one.